how far can each hero get in Chimps? First up, we have Quincy. We put him in the small square on resort and hit play. This is a great spot for most heroes as it lets them shoot the balloons a ton of times as they revolve around this spot. Plus, once Moabs start coming, Quincy will be able to reach them when they're on the second loop on the outside of the pool. This started off great as we didn't even have to use rapid fire until round 14, where we used it to take out the first batch of yellow balloons. We had to use this ability early on, so it was back up for round 15, otherwise we'd get stuck. With this early use and a little bit of micro, we were able to beat the round. Then we just used rapid fire again near the end of 15 so that we could pop most of the balloons while also letting some of them go around the outside of the track, letting the ability come back off cooldown. Round 16 was very close, but no abilities or micro was required, but then we got stuck. We needed to use rapid fire to pop the round 17 regens, but we also needed it for round 18 to handle all the green balloons. So we were stuck on round 18. But then I had an idea. What if Quincy had slightly more time? We booted this thing back up on logs, quickly got back to round 17, and popped them all with an ability. Unfortunately, we couldn't really stall the round because the balloons would just regen back up to yellows and get by Quincy, but logs is long enough that there's still some hope. Every time we tried round 18, our ability would come off cooldown at the very end and we'd only leak a couple balloons, but I was convinced that we could do it without using rapid fire. So after many attempts, this micro got us past the round. We started on first for a few attacks, then switched to strong once balloons got through the first log. We kept Quincy on strong until one attack before the grouped greens came into his range, changed him to last, and left him there until they turned the corner. From here, we switched him back to strong for most of the round and finished it off by changing him to first once the balloons were on the final straightaway. And just like that, we beat round 18 without an ability. And it turns out that that was actually needed as the pinks and yellows on 19 were a lot to deal with even with rapid fire. It wasn't too long though before we moved on to round 20 where we could afford his level 6 level up where he now shoots 2 arrows at a time, making the rounds much easier. This let us coast until round 23 where we had to use his rapid fire to get by, but it was okay because round 24 is one of the easiest in the game as long as you have camo detection, which we do. This lets us pop everything and even afford Quincy's level 7 on round 26, which now lets every third shot explode, dealing extra damage and lets him pop lead. With this new crowd control attack, we beat the massive rush on 27 without an ability and we were on to the round 28 lead. This and round 29 were pretty easy, not even needing an ability, but round 30 was different. These space leads took so long to pop and were hogging all of Quincy's shots that I used rapid fire to clean up the round, which made round 31 impossible. Even with his ability in sandbox mode, I wasn't able to beat round 31, so this is where I'm calling it. Now, maybe a different spot could let Quincy beat this round and I just didn't find it, but then I'd say his limit is round 34 or 35. I don't know how someone would beat those rounds with just Quincy, as I lost even when I gave him an extra level. Up next is Gwen, and she was a fun one. We went back to resort and hit play. She soloed the early rounds with no micro at all, as she was really taking advantage of the straight lines and overlapping tracks, letting her use more of her pierce. This took us all the way to round 13 where we leveled her up to 4 and unlocked her heated up passive that makes her erupt flames around her every 40 shots, dealing damage to nearby balloons. This is especially nice on resort as it'll damage all the balloons going around that small square. This, combined with her cocktail, made the rounds so easy that we didn't even have to micro until round 16, where we had to put her on strong to take out all the green and yellow layers early, and the reds and blues were easy to clean up after that. Round 17 needed a cocktail as Gwen couldn't keep up with the regen yellows, and so did round 19. But then we unlocked Gwen's damage over time passive and everything was easy once again. The map was long enough that we could shoot a white balloon once, and by the time it made it to the exit, it would burn all the way down to 2 greens. But it was just a matter of time until we reached round 25 and couldn't pop the purple balloons. Unfortunately, no map effect has enough popping power to take out all these purple layers, so this is where Gwen's run ends, which is a shame because she was doing so well outside of this. But now we're moving on to Striker Jones. Once again, we put him in the square on resort, but this time I set him to strong. I figured that we should target the fastest balloons and the explosions would take care of the weaker ones as the balloons overlap so much on this map. This worked great as nothing even posed a problem until round 15, but that was easily solved with 2 concussive shells, and the cooldown is so short that we don't really have to worry about it being unavailable. We use this ability again on round 16 to handle the yellows, but round 17 is where I got stuck. I tried many times, but I just wasn't able to pop all the regen yellows. They were just spaced out too much for concussive shell to stun them all, and some would leak every time. So Striker Jones capped out at round 17. Next up, we have Geraldo. Famous for his 1 TC on Scrapyard back in version 31.0, he has been nerfed over and over again. again, one of which was upping his base cost to $810 on Chimps. So we're starting every game with either the standard $650 or however much our current hero costs. We put Geraldo down in the top right of Scrapyard and hit play. He was able to beat round 6 fairly easily, but some Bloons did already make it back past the Crusher, meaning we popped them on the last pass before they would have leaped. Round 7 is more difficult, but this time we used the Crusher to pop 2 blues and a green that were headed back Geraldo's way. This let him clean up the rest of the round and be able to afford a shooty turret. From here, the plan was simple. Keep placing turrets in the top right until we can handle every round. And I don't want to overspend on turrets because we'll need to buy some levels in the future. I settled on 3 of them as this is what was used in his 1 TC, but quickly we had to start mixing in the Crusher and even some spike piles like we did on round 19. While not the end of the world to use these from time to time, I didn't want to rely on them, so in the early 20s we picked up 2 more turrets. With 5 of these down, we made it to round 25 where we had to start prepping for the leads coming on 28. In the middle of the round, we placed a creepy idol near the back of the Crusher. This is important because we need its knockback for round 28, but we want it to disappear after we pop the leads. But this is where things get intense. We had to pop round 26 like normal and do something really weird for 27. You see, we need to have exactly 3 pierce left on a bottle of glue for round 30. But the old way of doing this was figured out in version 31 when the glue had 300 pierce, but now it's been nerfed down to 100. To get around this, I put down 3 bottles of glue, totaling up to 300 pierce, and did the old strat. What we had to do was glue every balloon on rounds 27 and 28. Then we had to beat round 28 by getting a lucky knockback on the first lead balloon with the creepy idol we placed back on round 25. This knockback combined with the glue's slow put all the leads in range of the Crusher for us to be able to pop all of the lead layers. But now we have the hard part. We had to place 4 spike piles near the start of round 29 to pop 40 balloons and save some pierce for the bottle of glue. Then we had to spam spikes after the yellows were done spawning in order to pop all the regrow balloons before they made it to the glue. This left us with exactly 3 pierce, which lets us group up the leads enough on round 30 to all be crushed. At least it should have, but I must have placed the glue in the wrong spot as they weren't grouping up enough. But then I had a genius idea. Or a really dumb one. I couldn't quite tell. I placed down 2 creepy idols at the back of the Crusher and ran this round again and again, hoping for some lucky knockback. And eventually I did. Not only were we able to pop all but one of the leads with 1 crush, but the knockback RNG was finally on our side as it stalled this last lead balloon so long that the Crusher came back off cooldown in time to pop this guy. A hilarious and expensive way to beat the round, but I'll take it. After that, we got to step back and let it run. The rounds were pretty easy with our current setup, and the only thing we had to change was buying a camo potion on round 33. Then on round 35 we purchased Jerry's level 8 so we could get access to his spicy potion, and we used the Crusher anytime balloons got pretty far. Now I didn't want to place any more turrets down until Jerry hits level 13 and they get way stronger, but I figured one near the front wouldn't hurt. This way we can deal some early damage, but more importantly we can put the fire spirit on this guy to pop the leads coming in the late 30s before they get to our main defenses and waste a ton of our pierce. But not only was this a high value lead popper, it was so strong by this little loop that it basically soloed rounds 37, 38, and 39. Not too bad for a little turret and a fire spirit. But then it was time for round 40 and the Moab. Luckily for us, we were able to pop its outer layer right before it left the Crusher, so we stunned 3 of the 4 ceramics inside with it. Then, between the turrets, fire spirit, and some nails, we popped everything and moved on to the mid game. Here, I just kept 1 fire spirit up and running on the frontmost turret, used a camo potion on round 45, and spent the rest of our money rushing Jerry to level 10 where we could start buying his pet rabbit. I figured the earlier we get these, the more money we'd save as they're incredible at popping balloons. This brought us to the late 40s where we needed a little more damage while we waited for more rabbits to come in stock. Enter a second fire spirit, 1 on Geraldo and 1 on the turret up front. With these 2 spirits up and running, the balloons didn't stand a chance and we were making money hand over fist. While we weren't in trouble currently, we could solve basically any future problem with how much money we had in the early 50s. We just kept up these 2 spirits, purchased Jerry's levels when we could, and managed to get all 4 rabbits on round 56. This was definitely our biggest jump in damage so far, and it let me spend all of our money rushing Jerry to level 13 to unlock his upgraded turret. We got these on round 60 and instantly placed all 4 of them at the very start of the track. This will get us some great early damage on the round, as well as having that nice straightaway to shoot down after the Crusher. We didn't really get to see them do much until round 63 though, because the bunny was just taking care of everything. Once we placed a spicy potion on one of the turrets to take care of the layered leads, we got to see these turrets tear the ceramic rushes apart. and in the next few rounds they did work on the Moabs and BFBs too. This continued for a long time, as through round 80 all we did was buy a shooty turret anytime one came in stock, and between the turrets and bunny we popped everything. That is, until super ceramics came on round 81. This caused us to leak, so I put down 2 spicy potions. These are now the upgraded versions, so they last 10 rounds, meaning we'll have them for the rest of the 80s. Additionally, I started placing Geraldo's upgraded nails at the end of the track. These are now nail mines and are surprisingly good at dealing with leaking super ceramics. But this brings us to round 85, where we bought Geraldo's level 20 restock. With it, I started a new spot for his upgraded turrets, as the last one was pretty full. I figured having a nice stack of them near the very end of the track would be great for picking up any leaking balloons, as well as being a decent spot for them to damage blimps early on. This popped around 85 about halfway through the track, and then we got to use Geraldo's upgraded camo potion. This gives him, his turrets, and his bunny camo detection, extra damage to camos, and extra attack range. A huge value purchase, and it'll last the rest of the game. Now I had one goal: get to round 91 without using a bunch of items like spicy potions or sharpening stone. The reason for this is if we use them on round 91, they'll last the rest of the game, and the final few rounds are definitely the hardest, so I want as many items up and running as possible. To get to round 91, all we needed was a creepy idol near the crusher and a bunch of nail mines at the end of the track. For the most part, these mines weren't used, but we did need a few of them to take out the DDTs on round 90. From here on out though, everything is fair game. I placed all 3 of our spicy potions on the weaker turrets at the start of round 91. I chose these turrets because we can safely pickle them later on to get more out of the spicy potions without lowering the better turret's DPS. Additionally, I started putting sharpening stone on as many good turrets as possible for that extra pierce, and then I put another idol by the crusher. There's so many balloons in these rounds that even knocking back or stunning 25% of them does a surprising amount of work. For the DDTs on round 93, all we had to do was glue them, and the spicy potions and bunny took them out. Round 94, I tried using a blade trap, but it didn't even seem close to worth it, and then we put down another spicy potion on an old turret. This was more than enough to take out the round, as only a few balloons made it to our massive wall of spikes at the end of the track. Round 95 though, that required the big guns. We placed down a second totem and finally broke out a genie. This was able to handle the DDTs for the most part, but we did use a large amount of spikes to pop all the super ceramics inside. That's okay though, that's what they're there for. But now that it's round 96, we can safely pickle all the shooty turrets that have spicy potions on them, as that'll greatly increase their DPS and last through round 100. And it was during this round that I realized money wouldn't be our limiting factor. It'd be what was in stock, so I splurged and bought a Paragon Totem just for fun. I thought round 97 would be absolutely free, but a few super ceramics made it all the way to the end. And this brings us to the hardest round in the game. Round 98. I put down a creepy idol on the top left crate, a genie in the middle of the map, and some glue at the halfway point. And this got us through with only a few balloons hitting the nail mines at the end. I thought I was going to have to use all of our blade traps to get by, but now we can save those for round 100 if needed. But now we're on to the fortified DDTs of round 99. DDTs are definitely what we struggle with the most, as none of our turrets can damage them, but we still have a genie up from last round, and we put another glue down. And with that damage and slow, only 2 of the DDTs made it to the end, where our wall of nail mines was enough to take them out. And finally, we were on to round 100. I bought basically everything left in the shop: a genie, spicy potion, nail mine, turret, paragon totem, and a creepy idol. And just like that, we popped the bat about halfway through the track and beat Chimps with just Geraldo, our first hero that can solo Chimps if you start with him. Shifting gears, we have Obyn Greenfoot. He's one of the strongest early game heroes, so this shouldn't be too bad. He needed no micro for the early rounds, but once he hit level 3, I started spamming brambles. I made sure to use them whenever he wasn't attacking, because I wanted them to be placed a bit further back so we could have a massive wall of thorns if we ever hit a difficult round. This started off great, but once we were in the late teens, the balloons would routinely make their way all the way to the brambles, using all of their pierce. While not an issue, it did limit how big of a wall we could make. Now, I just had to make sure this ability was available for the round 24 camo balloon and the round 25 purples. Luckily, both went off without a hitch, but the pierce on round 25 was very close, as the last of the brambles pierce was used on the final purple of the round. But then the next few rounds were free. Obyn's attacks were doing much more, his brambles upgraded to having 100 pierce, and we weren't really worried until round 32, where we not only needed his brambles to pop all the purples, but also to take out most of the camos on 33. Then it came off cooldown just in time to be placed again and finish off the camos and move on to round 34. This round wasn't too bad as we just needed one more brambles to get by, but then we didn't stand a chance in round 35. Even with a bunch of retries and some nice slowing totems, we were still routinely overwhelmed, and it wasn't even close. So Obyn capped out at round 35. Rosalia was a fun one. We had to go on Scrapyard as that's her only hope of beating round 24, and we placed her in the top left. This will give her plenty of places to fly around, but her two main spots will be at the start of the track and on the top left crate. The start was pretty simple as she one-shots greens and below, and we used her grenade launcher to handle groups of balloons like the blues on round 10. This was very effective all the way until round 14, where the yellows were causing us problems. Her laser kept missing the yellows, so we actually ended up using her level 3 ability and the crusher to get by. Probably not the smartest play, but the crusher came back up in the middle of round 15 anyway. It took quite a few tries, but what we did to end up getting past this round was take out the first few balloons at the start of the track, and once we saw a yellow, fly Rosalia to the crate. This spot let her hit most of the yellows and pinks, and most of the time she'd snipe an extra balloon or two. Then we just had to crush a yellow that snuck by, and Rosalia's laser took care of the rest, letting us move on to round 16 with her scatter missile ability ready. We moved her back to the front, put on her grenade launcher and hit play. This took out most of the balloons, and we cleaned up the rest of them with the laser when they made their way back to the top left loop. This let us afford her level 5 that improves both of her attacks, and we instantly felt this power up. Her lasers now fully pop pinks, and her grenade launcher bounces from balloon to balloon. This should have made the round easy, but Rosalia was channeling her inner Quincy on round 19 as she missed every single laser attack on the pinks and regen yellows. To get around this, we flew Rosalia to the crate near the start of the round, and it magically fixed everything. Only one pink balloon got by, and we used the crusher to take it out. From here, we coasted to round 23 where a few balloons kept getting by, but I didn't want to use the crusher or her ability. Luckily, all we had to do was change Rosalia's targeting to strong, and she easily took the white and black balloons all the way down to reds, making the round very easy. We used the crusher to pop the round 24 camo balloon, and then round 25 took a while. Rosalia kept missing, so we had to move her to the crate to take care of the yellows, and even then we needed to use her scatter missile to take out a leaking balloon. But the purples were very easy to deal with as we just switched her to grenade launcher and took them out no problem. Rounds 26 through 30 were free, but then we finally unlocked her level 7 ability. Now she's a global hero that can use both of her guns while active, and when it's on cooldown we can place Rosalia on the track, making it much less likely that she'll miss her shot. This let us beat rounds 31 and 32, which I'm not sure we would have done without it, but that brings us to round 33 where there are too many camo balloons for the crusher to take out, and because Rosalia doesn't have camo detection, this is the end of her run. On to Churchill, who admittedly has a massive advantage because we get to start with $2,100 and place him in round 6. This isn't really fair, but oh well. We put him in the top right of Scrapyard and cruised through the early game, not even using an ability or micro until round 24, where we had to use the crusher to pop the camo green. In fact, we didn't even use armor piercing shells until round 39 when the zebras and rainbows started overlapping, and the second we used that ability, the round was done for. And because this map is so long, it was back up in time for the Moab on round 40. All we had to do here was upgrade Churchill to level 8, use his ability right when the Moab came in range, and then crush the black balloons when they made their way back. Honestly, the crusher was probably overkill, but I wasn't too worried about the next few rounds. Even though round 41 is all black and zebra balloons, Churchill's machine gun was enough to pop the outer layers, letting the shells handle the innards without having to use an ability. And while I was ready to start another AFK journey, the rounds were finally starting to get tough. We used armor piercing shells basically anytime there were ceramics or a bunch of zebras, and this carried us all the way to round 50 where we had to pop 2 Moabs. This required 2 ability uses and the crusher to do, but after many attempts we got by. On round 52 we unlocked Churchill's level 10 ability, Moab Barrage, which barely let us beat the round as we popped the final balloons as they were leaving Churchill's range. Luckily, round 53 has a long run of camo pinks before the real balloons come, letting our abilities come off cooldown. We had to Moab Barrage the 3 blimps and take out their insides with his armor piercing shells, but then we were on to round 54. What we had to do was pop all the ceramics with his level 3 ability, activate Moab Barrage the moment it came off cooldown, and stun the first 4 ceramics with the crusher, giving us enough time to use armor piercing shells again and clear the round. But this puts us in a pickle. With everything on cooldown, we didn't stand a chance against round 55. We were instantly overwhelmed and we hit the end of this run. Now, Churchill is easily my worst hero as I almost never use him, so I thought I'd give it another try. Luckily, we had a nice opportunity on round 52. At the start of that round, we purchased Churchill's 10th level, and his abilities were basically off cooldown. So I set up a checkpoint here, getting Churchill to level 10, and have the same amount of money left over as our previous run. This let me try over and over again, and I never got past round 55. Is this a skill issue? Yes, because there have been 2 TCs done with Churchill and the base Boomer, Angie, Ice, and more, so theoretically Churchill should be able to solo Chimps. I just have no idea how. If someone wants to make me a tutorial, I'll happily watch it and get better, but for now, this is my max round with Churchill. On to probably the highest skill run of the day, we have Benjamin. We put him down in round 6, and he didn't pop a single balloon. He leaked right away. Next, we have Fusty. We booted up Resort, put him in the middle of the square, and hit play. He tore through the rounds, not needing any help until round 15, where a yellow balloon got by. All we had to do was put Pat on strong, so we'd target the yellows and pinks, and then activate his roar once the pinks were in the middle. This made his main attack deal 4 damage instead of 3, and the shockwave around the slam deal 3 damage instead of 2. Overall, a large increase in damage, especially since all the balloons were on top of each other. Then we kept Pat on strong for round 16, as this lets him one-shot the greens and yellows, while his shockwave will bring the others down to weak balloons like blues and reds, which he can take care of later on. Pat marched through the next few rounds, especially once he hit level 5 and unlocked his slap attack that launches balloons back towards the entrance, buying him even more time to pop them. The combination of this new slap and being able to roar whenever we needed more damage let Pat get all the way to round 24 fairly easily, where we leaked the camo balloon. So we tried again on Scrapyard. This run was much more difficult all the way through, but we ended up stalling out on round 19. We had his roar and crusher available, but we just couldn't pop a balloon or 2 each time. And even if we had, everything would have been on cooldown for the next few rounds, meaning it would be very difficult to get back to round 24, let alone have the crusher available for the camo green. So round 24 is what we're awarding Fusty. On to Ezili. We put her down in basically the same spot as Pat, set her to strong, and hit play. She has a similar splash attack as Pat, so these balloon overlaps will be nice, and her damage over time will work great on stronger balloons because the map is easily long enough for us to get the most out of it. We just let her do her thing for the first several rounds, as there wasn't much we could do to make her better. Her level 3 is only useful for regens and purples, which don't come for a while, and taking her off strong is almost guaranteed to do worse. But leaving her on strong took us to the mid-teens, where she handled round 14 like a champ. Round 15, though, was a different story. We tried many times, changing something each time, but we couldn't get past the round. Then I tried on Scrapyard and Logs to see if the extra time would get us anywhere, but that was even worse. We only made it to rounds 8 and 9 on these maps, so Ezili's cap is round 15, one of the first tough rounds in a normal Chimps game. Next, we have Adora. I figured she'd make it to at least round 24, so we put her on Scrapyard to deal with the camo green. I wasn't sure where to place her because I wanted to get the most out of her seeking attack, so we put her on the top right crate and hit play. At the start, it was a little rough as she could only see the track right above her, but the second we spent the money to upgrade her to level 2, she got the range to hit the left and right tracks as well, giving her way more chances to hit the balloons. This let her absolutely smoke the rounds, and we got her level 4 upgrade on round 13. This lets her shoot 2 divine bolts per attack, doubling her damage. And this was just in time for rounds 14 and 15, which were a piece of cake with this. In fact, we didn't even use her ability for round 15, and still the balloons didn't make it halfway through the track, really showing how well Adora was doing. This continued until the end of round 21, where I was forced to use her ability. The nice thing about this is that not only did it clean up the round without us having to use the crusher, but it also gave us a nice start to round 22, as Long Arm of Light lasted long enough to get a few boosted attacks in before it wore off. We used the crusher on round 24 and then used her ability on the purples on 25. This gives her the normal damage type, letting us get past a round that magic attacks normally can't deal with. And with this, we coasted through the rest of the 20s and early 30s. Adora counters the leads on 28 and 30, so we didn't have to worry about those at all, and then we used her ability again on 32 to pop all the purples. But this brings us to round 33, where there are too many camos for the crusher, and Adora doesn't get camo detection with levels. So Adora is tied with Rosalia, with this being her max round. Moving on, we have Etienne. We put him on the square of Resort and hit play. Now, there isn't any real targeting we can do with him, so my only job is to spend our money leveling him up. A true BTD6 experience. What's nice is that his drones were really taking advantage of Resort straight lines. I was half expecting them to be shooting at odd angles and wasting their pierce, but for the most part, these dragons did great. So great that I didn't have to use his drone swarm ability until round 13, where I just used it as a precaution because of how many balloons were making it to the final pass. But with this use, we cleaned up the round very easily. This probably wasn't needed though, as Etienne was able to beat round 14 without it. Round 15 though. That's a different story. We needed to activate Drone Swarm after 3 or 4 pink balloons spawn. This does several things for us. First, it lets us pop round 15 and helps with the start of 16, both of which are impossible without the ability. Then, it lets it come off cooldown in time to pop the regen yellows on 17 and help with the start of round 18. Without these extra drones on all 4 rounds, Etienne would have been done for. But that's not the hardest timing of the run. No, that comes on round 19. We needed to use Drone Swarm at the perfect time on round 19 to pop the round and leave enough time on the clock for the extra drones to pop most of round 20. But we needed to let a blue or red balloon make it to the final pass to give us enough time to get the drones off cooldown. This would let us use Drone Swarm for round 21 and beat the round. Unfortunately, the closest I ever got to this was letting a single yellow make it all the way around the track, which was just too fast, so I never had Drone Swarm in time to beat round 21. Luckily, I'm pretty sure round 22 would have been impossible without an ability, so I'll say my limit was 21 with a theoretical limit of round 22. But feel free to prove me wrong here and grind some Etienne runs. Up next, we have Sai, who has unlimited range, so I figured either Resort or Logs would be best for them. I tried on Resort first because putting them in the square would give them an amazing spot to activate their Psychic Blast ability that stuns the balloons around them. Round 6 and 7 were pretty free as I just put Sai on Strong and hit play. This let them pop everything, but even on these first 2 rounds, some balloons were making it pretty far along the track. For round 8, we needed to switch Sai to first, as that was the only way to pop all the blues before they leaked, because Sai kept getting distracted by the green balloons that were spawning later on. Round 9 was also a bit close as Sai had to deal with the 30 spaced greens, but was able to pop them just before they reached the final straightaway. Round 10 though is a bit tougher. It's Sai's greatest weakness at this point in the game. Tons of weaker balloons. Even with a well-timed stun or 2, Sai didn't stand a chance against the 102 blues that came their way. I ran this back on Logs to see if the extra time would be worth the worst stun trade-off, and it didn't make a difference, so Sai capped out at round 10 once again. On to Sauda, the first hero to ever beat Chimps all on their own, but she's been nerfed or changed quite a bit since then. Still though, her damage is pretty crazy, especially on a map like Resort. The beginning was as easy as you'd expect. Place her down and watch her chop through the rounds as if they were never there. This was the case all the way until rounds 28 and 30, where we had to use her Sword Leap ability to pop the leads that came on these rounds. But after that, the AFK massacre continued. 30s flew by as we only needed to use her ability for the leads on 37 and 38, and other than that, she popped everything. But that brings us to the round 40 Moab. I actually leaked a few times as I was trying to pop the outer layer with Sauda's attacks and one-shot the ceramics inside with her ability like I do in a normal game, but she just wasn't doing enough damage. But then I realized I had over 11 grand in the bank to spend on upgrading her, and with the extra attack speed she gets from level 8, we easily beat the round. So I was struggling for no reason. In the 40s, there were 2 things I had to be careful of: leads and ceramics. If a round had leads, I automatically used her ability once they made it to the small loop. This took them all out and helped with the rest of the round, but with ceramics I had to decide. If it looked like we could handle them, like on round 47, I would just let Sauda do her thing, but if things were getting a bit spicy, I'd have Sauda pounce on the track and one-shot them all. This continued until round 49, where Sauda hit level 10, unlocking her sword charge ability, which I obviously used right away because it's cool. This turned out to be the right call though, because we had to use this and a sword leap to beat the round. But now, Moabs are starting to come every round, so I needed to start being careful. When alone, Sauda can pop them all no problem, but when they are layered on top of other balloons, especially leads, things get a bit tricky. So the 50s is where I started getting pretty frugal with her ability. I didn't want to get caught on a beatable round with both of her abilities on cooldown. The nice thing is that with her limited range, I could normally use her abilities to pop most of the round, and then there would be a few balloons left to go all the way around the outside of the track, giving Sauda at least some time to work on her cooldown. A great example of this was round 58, where we used both of her abilities early on, and then some reds made it almost to the final pass. But this brings us to round 60 and our first BFB. I used Sword Leap right as it came on the map, and again once we popped all the Moabs down to ceramics. Unfortunately, this only popped 75% of them as the last Moab lived slightly longer than the others, but at this point in the game, Sauda was strong enough to handle them on her own, and it actually gave us extra time to get Sword Leap back earlier next round. And boy did we need it. Round 61 has 150 regrow zebras and 5 Moabs. Ideally, we'd focus down the blimps and the zebras would be collateral damage, but because they're regrow, they'd multiply and get through. So after a few attempts, this is how we got past round 61. We started off by leveling Sauda up to level 12 and put her on strong. This let her focus the Moabs instead of getting distracted by the zebras, but once our fellow Regrow Bloons were about to leak, we used Sauda's level 10 to clean up the screen and hurt the blimps a bit. From here, we had to change her back to first, use Sword Leap once the Moab started breaking down to ceramics, and let Sauda clean it up from there. Was it a bit close with a group of yellows making it to the end? Yes, but at least we had a bunch of reds going along the outside once again. This was great for her cooldowns, but round 62 was even harder than 61, and there are way more Bloons and 2 fortified Moabs. So this is what we did. We started the round by putting Sauda on close and letting her attack until the first 2 Moabs overlap. Here, we swapped her to strong, used Sword Leap, and put her back to close. This made her ability target the first 2 Moabs while also being able to pop all the purples. Leaving her on close would let the next few blimps get by, so once the first one got in range, we switched her over to strong. This let her pop or deal tons of damage to the Moabs, and we used her sword charge once a group of yellows approached the exit. This left us with 2 fortified Moabs and a few weaker Bloons to deal with. We left Sauda on strong, and once the 2 Moabs overlapped, we used Sword Leap once again. This broke the first one wide open and dealt tons of damage to the second. But now, the fortified ceramics were running way ahead of the second Moab, so we had to put Sauda back to first to pop them before they got away. This targeting was able to whittle everything down to just a bunch of blue balloons, once again giving us time to get our abilities back up and running. But now, we're on to the dreaded round 63. Luckily, Sauda counters this round pretty hard, as all we had to do was take out the first 2 rushes with a sword charge and the third with a sword leap. This was needed because Sauda didn't have lead popping power, but it puts us in a pickle for round 64 as both of our abilities are on cooldown. This really only let us use each ability once for this round, which was just not enough. The closest I got was using Sword Leap on the fortified Moabs and using Sword Charge once some yellows were about to leak, but even then, we were never really that close to beating the round. Maybe had I stalled round 63 somehow, we would have been fine, but I didn't really know how to do that without getting crazy lucky, as those lead balloons were tricky to deal with. But round 64 is not a bad score at all. Next up, we have Admiral Brickell. We put her in the pool and resort, set her to strong, and hit play. She quickly moved through the rounds as her pistol was taking care of the blues and greens while her sea mines were taking out the groups of red. This combo was working great, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about round 15. All of her sea mines were used to pop everything on round 14, so I figured the pinks might just blow by without a reserve of these in the pool. But I was wrong. Even without a single ability and extra sea mines, Brickell was able to pop everything on 15 pretty easily. Not a single balloon even made it to the outer track. It wasn't until round 18 and 19 that the balloons routinely started making it to the end, but even here I wasn't too worried. When they did get that far, they were really weak, and Brickell had time to put some mines down. Round 21 though was the first time we leaked. It turns out that 40 yellows and 14 pinks were too much for Brickell to handle without an ability. One use of naval tactics changed this though, and we were off to round 22 and had 16 whites. I was a little worried about not having Brickell's level 3 off cooldown, but her pistol made this round quite easy as it brought every white down to 2 greens, which were very easy to deal with. Round 23 was basically the same, as it's just 7 black and 7 white balloons, but round 24 was a game ender. We didn't have the money to make Brickell level 7 and get camo detection, so the camo green got through. I tried again on the map Tinkerton in the hopes that we could use the rocket to pop the camo, but we couldn't get past round 16. So Brickell is tied with Fusty with a cap of 24. And finally, we have Corvus. People have beaten chimps with just him in the past, but he's been nerfed many times since then, so we'll see how this goes. He's easily the most complicated hero to use, but the early game was surprisingly simple. I just put him at the front of the map so that he could haunt balloons as they spawn, and his base spirit took care of the rest. From here, I just used Nourishment and his level 3 ability Soul Harvest basically anytime they were off cooldown. In fact, outside of Nourishment, the first spell we used was Vision for the round 24 camo green balloon. But shortly after that, we started casting spells left and right. We used Trample on the round 25 purples, Ember on the round 28 and 30 leads, Trample on the round 32 purples, Vision on 33's camos, and then we Spirit Walked Corvus to the middle of the map once they hit level 7. It's okay to put him over here now because the balloons are either tanky enough or fast enough to make it to him before getting popped, so he's in a better position for his abilities and is still able to haunt balloons to get some passive mana. We used Ember, Vision, Trample, and Nourishment a few more times in the 30s, but what was fun was that we got to use Spear to clear on 39, and we still ended with a full mana pool to take down the round 40 Moab. It took a few tries, but this is what we ended up with. I started the round with Nourishment, cast his level 3 ability right when it came off cooldown, Spirit Walked Corvus to the end of the track, toggled Storm in the final few seconds of the round to pop the outer layer and then soul harvested all of the ceramics inside. This not only cleared the round, but left us with a full mana pool as if nothing ever happened. Then we just walked Corvus back to the middle and spent all of his mana on nourishment once again. I was afraid of being underleveled, but we were actually on a pretty good pace so far. Nothing too crazy happened in the early 40s, we just used Spear whenever the screen was full of bloons and Vision anytime camos came our way. Round 45 was a bit fun as we got to cast Vision and Trample to take care of the camo purples, but after that we went right back to nourishing away. The late 40s have some ceramics in there, but that wasn't anything an Ember couldn't take care of. In fact, the tricky part was dealing with all the camo pinks on round 47. They lasted too long for Vision alone, so we had to wait for most of them to be on the screen before spending the mana on Vision and Spear. Basically, the entire run I was terrified of spending too much mana on fun spells instead of leveling him up with it, so I tried to cast as few spells as possible. Round 48 was super close as we needed to cast Trample and Vision again to pop the camo purples, but Vision was on cooldown and we didn't have the mana for both of these spells. Luckily, Vision came off cooldown at the last second and we were able to use Soul Harvest and cast Trample right before the first purple bloon leak. This brings us to round 50 where Corvus finally hit level 10 and unlocked Dark Ritual, another way of getting a huge amount of mana. This was excellent timing as we used it this round. To beat round 50, we waited until the ceramics caught up to the first Moab before we cast Ember and Dark Ritual. This popped basically everything except for the second Moab while also keeping Corvus at max mana. Then we turned Storm on to pop the outer layer of the Moab, toggled it off once that layer was popped, and Corvus's base spirit took care of the rest. Round 51 only needed some patience, Vision, and Spear to take down. Round 52, I accidentally left Spear on for the start, but it turned off once I spent all our mana on nourishment, and then we had to use Spear, Aggression, Storm, and Soul Harvest to pop the two Moabs before they leaked. Round 53 though, that took a few tries. We had to wait until the camo pinks were at the final turn of the map before casting Vision and using Dark Ritual. This let Corvus and the Spirit clear most of the screen, but then the Moabs would distract them. So we had to cast Spear to continue popping the camo pinks while Vision was still active. Once it wore off, we turned off Spear and cast Soul Barrier once the pinks were leaving the map. This lets us use Corvus's mana in place of lives for a short time, and it lasts just long enough to tank all the leaking camos. Now, all that was left was 3 Moabs, so we used Ember and Storm for the first 2, and then Soul Harvested all of the ceramics inside the final Moab. Round 54 was just as tough though. We started off the round by turning off Storm and on Spear. This gave us a good head start on the ceramics, but eventually they got far enough to where we had to use both Aggression and Dark Ritual. With these two, we had a full mana pool and only 2 Moabs to worry about, which we easily cleaned up by turning Storm back on and using Soul Harvest on the final 4 ceramics. 56 was fun because we got to use Vision to see the camo rainbows and pop them all with Dark Ritual. This gave us so much mana that we filled up to 800, spent it all on nourishment, and filled back up to 800 again, which let us easily pop the Moab as we used Spear on the ceramics inside. But the rest of the 50s were easy. The Spear was strong enough to handle most of the bloons with barely any help, and anytime Moabs came, I would just toggle Storm, which popped the outer layer quickly. Round 60 was where it got fun again though. We used Ancestral Might for the first time this run, which turns Corvus's Spirit into a close range hand that deals tons of single target damage. This popped the BFB layer pretty quick, and we went back to using Storm to take out all the Moab. Round 61 was the opposite of single target damage though. There were enough Zebra Bloons to let us cast Dark Ritual, spend 800 mana on nourishment, and fill back up before having to deal with the Moab. Having to deal with 5 of them was pretty tough though. We had to turn on Aggression, Storm, Spear, and use Soul Harvest to stop everything from leaking. This got us to 62, which was another fun one. We started off the round by toggling off Storm and Aggression, spent 4 grand to level Corvus up to 12, and set him to Strong. This will make his Spirit focus the Moabs while we wait for the purples to make it to the end of the track. Once they got there, we cast Trample to take them and quite a few Moabs out before we switched Corvus back to first to take out the remaining 2 Moabs and their ceramics. Then we Soul Harvested a ton of purple bloons, set Corvus back to Strong to target the fortified Moabs, and used Soul Barrier to tank the rest of the purples that were going to leak. To deal with the camo rainbows, we cast Vision and Ember, and we cleaned up the final fortified Moab with Storm, Aggression, and Frostbound. And even with all this, the final few ceramics were super close to leaking. This left us in a tough spot for 63, as we were basically out of mana and plenty of spells were on cooldown. But we were able to Soul Harvest some bloons early on, letting us cast Trample to take out all 3 waves of ceramics and only left us with 6 leads to worry about, which we got with 1 Reap of Soul Harvest. Round 64 required Ancestral Might at the start to do massive damage to the Moabs, Dark Ritual to give us the mana for more spells, and then we popped the rest with Aggression and a combination of Spear and Storm. At this point, Corvus is level 12, so his main Spirit can handle a lot of the weaker bloons, even some ceramics. This is nice because it let us spend a ton of mana on nourishment while also also getting all of our spells off cooldown. But we know that Bloons wouldn't let us off the hook that easy. No, all the rounds seemed to end with something mana intensive like a BFB or Moab, but nothing really crazy happened until round 75. This round is full of BFBs and Moabs and took quite a bit to take out. We started off with Ember to take out the fortified leads, then Aggression, Storm, and Echo to damage the blimps, but this blew through mana, so we needed to 1. Use Soul Harvest when things got in range, and 2. Turn off all the spells once only BFBs remain. This let everything come off cooldown as the BFBs are pretty slow. Once the first 2 BFBs broke down to Moabs, we cast Dark Ritual to max out our mana and use Spear, Aggression, and Storm to clean up the round. And even with this, some Bloons still made it to the last pass. Luckily, we still had enough mana to pop round 76 with a Trample. We just had to cast it right away before our Spirit made a Regrow Farm big enough to cap out Trample's Pierce. Round 78 was the next tough round as we needed to save Trample for the purples. So for the first rush of ceramics, we cast Spear, Aggression, and Ember while using Soul Harvest to keep up our mana. This popped everything and pushed the Bloons all the way back to the entrance. Here we set Corvus to strong so that his Spirit would target the BFB, and we left Spear on to target any rainbows that got close to it. We turned this off once the purples passed the BFB, and we waited until all the purples and camo ceramics had spawned to cast Vision and Trample. This took out everything but a few Moabs, but those were easily popped with Spear and Aggression once again. 79 wasn't tough, but it was definitely more fun. We started off with Nourishment and just letting the base Spirit pop the rainbows all on its own, but once it broke down the first BFB, it needed some spells to help out. Naturally, we cast Ember to get rid of the insides and Dark Ritual to end the Regrow Farm that Ember started. Then we cast Overload for the first time this run to bring the fortified BFBs down to damaged Moabs, then use Spear, Aggression, and Storm to take them out. Now, all that's left are 3 BFBs. We spent our money leveling Corvus up to 16, and his base Spirit was able to finish the rest of the round. What a power spike for a Spirity companion. Round 80 was super simple. Just cast Nourishment right away and let the base Spirit take out the ZOMG layer while we cast Soul Harvest thrice to max out our mana. Then I used Overload on the BFBs and one-shot them all. Was this a bit silly and risky? Yeah. But I like casting Overload, and I figured we'd be able to handle round 81. The only scary thing is that from this round on, all the ceramics got buffed to super ceramics, making them much harder to take out. And because of that, it actually took us a few tries to beat. We started off by moving Corvus to the front and casting Dark Ritual and Nourishment while letting the base Spirit whittle down the BFBs and Moabs. But once the Moabs split into super ceramics, it was time to cast Aggression and take them out faster. From here, we toggled on Storm, and once Dark Ritual was back up, we cast Spear and Ember as well. Finally, we finished the round with Echo, Soul Harvest, and by moving Corvus back to his main spot. Round 82 was a sketchy one. At the start, we let his Spirit do his thing until Corvus's abilities were off cooldown because we desperately needed mana. Here, we used Soul Harvest, let the Spirit clean up some Moabs, set Corvus to strong, and cast Overload to take out the fortified BFBs. This popped quite a few of them, but also left a lot of fortified Moabs to deal with. To pop them and the super ceramics inside, we had to cast Spear, Aggression, Storm, Echo, and Frostbound, and even with all these, the Bloons got super close to the exit. 83 took a long time to beat because I kept getting greedy with Nourishment, but this is how we eventually got by. We started by instantly turning off Spear, Aggression, and Storm to save what little mana we had. Then, once we could afford it, we cast Ember to hold off the ceramics until Soul Harvest was off cooldown. This let us max out our mana pool and cast Spear, Aggression, and Storm and run these until we were back out of mana. Luckily, this let us live long enough to cast Dark Ritual and Soul Harvest, giving us the mana to cast these 3 spells again, plus Frostbound and Ember to pop everything on the final straightaway of the map. Now, I'm starting to see a trend of every round being difficult because 84 took longer than the previous 2 combined. What we settled on was turning every spell off right away to save some mana, and once we had enough, we cast Echo, set Corvus to strong, and cast Overload. This popped tons of Moabs and BFBs, but the ones remaining were marching on while our Spirit was out of commission. The second he was back up, we cast Repel, Aggression, used Soul Harvest, Frostbound, and Ember. This left us with just the BFBs, so we moved Corvus to the right side of the map, used Dark Ritual, toggled on Spear, cast Nourishment, instantly used Soul Harvest, and let the Spirit finish off the round. This set us up for success on 85, as we could use Nourishment again and purchase his 18th level for less money. Then we just waited until the first ZOMG broke into BFBs, and I used Overload to one-shot them, leaving us with just the second ZOMG, which we popped with a second Overload. There's certainly a better way to do this, but like I said earlier, earlier, I really like that spell, so I'll be using it a lot. Plus, round 86 is slow, so I figured would be okay. To deal with 86, we moved Corvus around to use Soul Harvest and Dark Ritual effectively throughout the round, and we popped the fortified BFBs with Storm, Aggression, and finished the round with Echo and Repel. As for 87, we popped the first 3 ZOMGs with the classic Echo Overload combo, and finished off the last one with Aggression, Ember, and Frostbound. Now, we did leak a few Bloons here, but that was nothing a little Soul Barrier couldn't handle. I'm actually not sure if I should have spent more mana to pop everything, or just use the barrier, but it was too late to go back, so on to round 88 we go. Here, we used Echo, Spear, and Aggression to take out the start of the round, and once Echo wore off, we cast Frostbound to finish everything but the ZOMG. And in the middle of all this, we upgraded Corvus to level 19, which now lets him haunt Moab class Bloons. As for the ZOMGs, we popped them with an overload. Now, going into round 89, you'll notice the cooldowns are a bit different. It's because I accidentally threw on round 91 of this run, so I had to do it again, but we're basically in the same spot here. To get past this round, we cast Aggression right away, waited until the Moab started breaking, then cast Echo, Repel, Ember, and eventually Storm to pop everything except for the BFBs. Then, right before Echo wore off, we cast Overload, and we're just left with a few super ceramics to clean up, which our base spirit was more than able to handle. Round 90 was easily popped with Vision and Ancestral Might. Round 91 let us use Nourishment at the start of the round and still be able to pop the ceramics with a last second trample, and we popped the 20 BFBs with a slew of spells, like Aggression, Storm, Echo, Ember, and Spear. The Bloons got pretty far, but we were able to pop them all, have plenty of mana, and have most of our spells either off cooldown or close to it. With round 92, the hardest part was the 50 fortified Moabs. We started off strong with the Spear, Aggression, Storm combo, then finished off the Moabs with an Echo Trample, turning off Spear, Aggression, and Storm once all that was left were the 4 ZOMGs. Then, once we used our abilities enough to get back to max mana, we recast Spear, Aggression, Storm, and Ember to finish off the round. Round 93 was funny as we took out all the DDTs by casting Vision and then Echo overloading them, giving us some time to focus down the BFBs. To do this, we cast the usual Aggression and Storm, but because they were already halfway through the track, we also had to cast Echo and Ember once we had the mana. This took out the vast majority of them, but we still had to finish the round with a Repel in order to stop the final few super ceramics from getting away. On to round 94. I cast Recovery right away to let all the blimps come on screen without us damaging them, as well as getting all our spells off cooldown. Then we set Corvus to strong and Echo overloaded all the BFBs away, leaving us with just 6 ZOMGs at the start of the map. We let the base spirit do some damage for a while before casting Recovery once again. This let us cast another overload, taking out all but 1 ZOMG, which was popped with just a Frostbound. And this, my friends, brings us to round 95, the round I could not beat. I spent hours on this round alone, even studying how people have done it in the past, and I got the routine down to a science. Start the round off with Vision and Repel, wait until Vision is just about to wear off, and cast Trample. This Trample will pop every single camo purple if done correctly. The second the Trample finishes, we cast Recovery to get Vision back up and running for us to attack the DDTs. Next, we use our abilities to gain mana, cast Vision, Echo, and Ancestral Might. This starts taking out the DDTs, but it's not enough. So we have to move Corvus to the back of the map so that when Corvus hits the DDTs, the splash damage can help with the leaking ceramic. Finally, we cast Soul Barrier and tank any Bloons that get by, but it was never enough. In fact, I never even got close to winning. Maybe I didn't set myself up for success with my mana pool and cooldowns, maybe Corvus has just been nerfed too much, or most likely I just don't know how to get the most out of Corvus. But around 95 is as far as I could get with him. But that's how far I could get in Chimps with every single hero in BTD 6. If you want to see this but with monkeys, check out these videos right here.